Welcome to Barry's In the Interim podcast, where we explore the cutting edge of innovative clinical trial design for the pharmaceutical and medical industries, and so much more. Let's dive in.
All right, welcome everybody back to In the Interim. I'm your host, Scott Barry, and I have a guest today, Kaspar Rufibach. And I don't know how close I got to that, but I gave it a shot. So Kaspar, welcome to In the Interim.
Thank you, Scott. And you pronounce it quite well, so very good approximation to my last name.
Okay. So Kaspar is currently a statistician, and I want to make sure I get your title correct here. What is your title at Merck?
So I'm co-heading a group which is called Advanced Biostatistical Sciences. So I'm the co-head of Advanced Biostatistical Sciences at Merck.
Yeah. And we'll go into a little bit of your history. Kaspar's having a lot of impact on ICH, European leadership within the statistical community, within pharma, within regulators, and has a really interesting history. So I'm thrilled to have a discussion with Kaspar of all things science, leadership, statistics. So let's start with how you got into statistics, maybe a little bit of your background, your educational background.
Yeah, that's funny. In high school, I was drawn to math and physics and these quantitative things I really was interested in, but I wasn't sure what should I study. And in high school, or what we call here gymnasium, we had these descriptions of jobs, and there was one description of an insurance mathematician, and he was describing how he insures kind of oil tankers and what you need to do for that, and that I found really interesting. And I didn't want to study pure math for a certain reason. So I thought, and so what he did study, this insurance guy, was a subject at the University of Bern, quite close to where I grew up, which is called mathematical statistics and actuarial science. So I then went for that and started, and I had a lot of insurance mathematics and on statistics, and it really hooked me up. And I thought I will go into finance industry, because in Switzerland you have a lot of insurance, your banks, at least at the time when I studied. And then when I started my PhD...
Well, let's back up a little. So in the US, I think we have actuarial exams, for example. Somebody becomes an actuary. Did you go down that route at all?
No, so I did then a master's in actuarial, so mathematical statistics and actuarial science. And I think these exams, they would then, or I would take them once I would have entered industry and worked for a while. I think this is how it works here. Okay. Then you take these exams and then you become an actuarian, technically. So yeah, I then started my PhD quite after the master's. And at the university, always one of the PhD students would kind of be rented out to a collaborative group, the Swiss Institute for Applied Cancer Research. Like you would then work 3 days on a PhD, and 2 days you would get exposed to biostatistics there. And that job became available, and I talked to my office mate who did it before and said, do you think that is something for me? And then he said, I always found it interesting, just give it a shot. Yeah. And so I started there, and that's how I ended up in biostatistics. I started kind of designing and analyzing phase 2 and phase 3 cancer trials back in 2002. And this really hooked me up, and I found it really very interesting, and stayed with that and never looked back.
Oh, very interesting. So there you're at the University of Bern, you complete your PhD at that point, and then you do a year postdoc at Stanford?
That's right.
In the U.S.? Yep. Was that biostatistics associated or not?
No. My PhD, so technically I have a PhD in mathematics, but it was a topic in mathematical statistics, kind of semi or non-parametric density estimation. And yeah, then there is in Switzerland, you have this opportunity to apply for a postdoc grant. So it's in the Swiss government who gives you some money and to basically go anywhere. And I took that opportunity. And in Stanford, I worked on related topics compared to my PhD. So it's not like I pursued something biostatistical, but I mean, one of the perks going to Stanford, of course, is and as a postdoc anyway, you're free. I mean, you get the money up front. You basically can do what you want. So I got in touch. I did what a lot of people do when I was at Stanford. Yeah. I looked for what are Swiss people around here. And then I met a few of those, a professor of neurology and postdocs, and they were all from Switzerland. So I met them because they were Swiss, but then we started to collaborate. So I then worked with them on doing some very early machine learning stuff in Alzheimer's disease, kind of building prediction models. So I kept a little bit the foot in this biostatistical arena. And then when I came back, there was an opportunity at the University of Zurich at the Institute for Social and Preventive Medicine in the biostats department, if you want, where I could continue to do that research, but then also one of my tasks was consulting of medical doctors of the university hospital. And that's where, I mean, before at this collaborative group, I did clinical trials, but then with this consulting, and I guess everybody who has done that for a while in their professional life, they know how this is. It is, I mean, you just sit at your desk, you have these doctors coming, and they have all these problems. And every 30 minutes, you get exposed to a very different problem. And that's where I think broadened my horizon and my knowledge about statistical methods dramatically. And I also kind of complemented the thorough theoretical background that I had through my PhD and postdoc. Then really, I really learned about applied statistics.
So a very interesting thing. It sounds almost like drive-through consulting, if you will, kind of thing. And without perhaps, I don't know, maybe you had the ability to be on an extended grant and work on it and really get into the details of that. But a nice hit and run look at consulting. So you do that, and then the decision is what to do. I don't know if you're entertaining academia at this point, if you're entertaining different places, but that's the point where you go to Roche.
That's right. So you're perfectly right at some point, and you need to make a decision. And I always kind of, my kind of personal deadline was my 35th birthday. That after that, I know which direction maybe to go. So, I mean, there were a few things. One thing was this theoretical research. I came to the office every morning, and it started to feel like, what problem no one has do I solve today? And I got a little bit tired of that. And the other thing is, I was teaching in a master program in biostatistics, and basically was telling students how to run clinical trials. And of course, you can learn that from books. I had this experience from the collaborative group, but at some point I felt maybe I should have a look myself first before telling others how to do it. And of course, I worked in Zurich. Basel is 1 hour away, and if you are a biostatistician in Switzerland, it's quite obvious at some point. I mean, you know a lot of people in the ecosystem in Basel anyway already, and if you're interested, and it's very obvious to knock at the door maybe at some point, and that's what I did. And then joined Roche as a trial statistician in 2012. And I started 1 week after my 35th birthday, so I was well within my own deadline.
Very interesting. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do in life, and I blew past my 35th birthday, so that's interesting. So Basel is Roche, Bayer, a hub for pharma within Switzerland. Are there others that I should know?
I think there are others you should actually know.
Okay.
No, I mean, Basel, I think, is the only city globally that is the host of two of the biggest pharma companies, the other one being Novartis.
Oh, Novartis, yes.
So they're both headquartered in Basel, and around those two companies, a huge ecosystem has grown over time. Pharma, biotech in general, but also biostatistics specifically. There are a lot of companies, like you mentioned, Bayer, who has expanded in Basel recently quite a bit. And there are some mid-sized pharmas, there are biotechs, and Switzerland is very small, as I said. There's 1 hour train ride to Zurich with ETH, and then this biostats department at the University of Zurich. And it's about 1 hour to Bern with other biostats capacity. It's about 90 minutes to Lausanne with another ETH and statisticians. 1 hour to Freiburg. So everything is very close. It's basically coming from America, you could basically say it's virtually all in the same city, because the trains, a 60-minute train ride. If you think about a 60-minute drive somewhere, that's within the same city, basically. So there's a huge ecosystem of statistical capacity, and there's a huge sense of collaboration, especially in Basel. So, for example, we have the Basel Biometric Society, and you would organize seminars and trainings, and they're just open to anyone, from all companies, from academia. We have Swissmedic, the regulator, which is also in Bern. And then you would just convene and have discussions. And I think this contributes to a very attractive workplace for statisticians that Basel is and has been.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's where you currently reside.
So as you see in the background, I live about 2.5 hours away from Basel in my hometown. But I mean, my professional ecosystem is Darmstadt. That's where Merck internally, a lot of my stakeholders are, and Basel, where there is this kind of critical mass of statisticians, where all these events are, and a lot of my collaboration partners. So I regularly go to Basel and just to meet up people.
Yeah, very nice. Okay, so let's go back. So you go to Roche. You become a statistician at Roche. I've never worked within a pharma company. Tell me what life is like as a statistician, and it doesn't have to be specific to Roche and nothing confidential, but what is life like as a statistician within pharma?
So, I came with this academic background, a very thorough education in theoretical statistics, applied statistics. And I entered Roche. It was my explicit wish, and it was also the clear kind of communication from those Roche people who hired me. They basically said, you have all this background, we see your potential, but bottom line, you have no clue about clinical trials and drug development, so you learn that first. And this is what I did, and this is what I truly enjoyed. For about 5 years, I was a trial statistician. So I was running trials, designing trials, and enjoyed that a lot. You learn a lot. And you learn this. You come in and you have the idea that the biggest piece that you contribute is your statistical expertise. And of course, that's what you do. But I think the even bigger piece, the more senior you get, is you help teams identify their questions, be precise about what they want to know, what they need to know, what is the bigger picture, kind of this structured thinking that you learn when you write a PhD thesis. You have this huge problem, you have no clue how to solve, and then you chop it up in small pieces, you solve all the small pieces, and you put it back again. And like drug development is very similar to that. And the more you get exposed to that, the more you learn about that. So I found it I found it. You asked about how's life at pharma. I found it very, very interesting. And immediately I found I could bring all this statistical expertise to the table. You have the collaboration with all these other functions. You have to understand the inner workings of clinical trials. Make sure that when people from other functions wanted to change something about your trial, always in your head, you checked against, okay, do I still get what I need at the end of the trial when they start to change and tinker around with things? I found this very, very interesting.
Yeah. So to some extent, I guess how do you define what statistics is, what the science of it is? I mean, in some ways, this is kind of our expertise. The clinical trial science is, clinical trial is asking a question of Mother Nature. You're posing a question to Mother Nature, and the whole part of this, and what are we trying to answer? What questions are we asking? How are we asking them? How does it fit in within the development? I mean, to some extent, this is the science of the clinical trial, which is statistics. Now, it sort of depends, much more so than calculating a sample size or that sort of thing, and trying to figure out the whole puzzle. What is the puzzle is kind of a strength of statisticians if we jump into the full team of all of that. I mean, to some extent, it is statistics. You may not learn that in a textbook, but somewhat that's our science.
No, I completely agree. And the way I phrase it when I tell younger people, for example, what to expect in pharma industry, I tell them, you enter as a statistician. You know all these methods. You have a good quantitative understanding, but you have to evolve into a drug developer. What you described, you said it's statistical science. Maybe you can say it's drug development. And that's much, much broader than statistics. But what you learn as a statistician and what you bring as a statistician is paramount and absolutely crucial in drug development. I think statisticians should not shy away from assuming these responsibilities and assuming that impact that you can actually have. And sometimes I say that some statisticians have the tendency to hide behind technicalities, because that's what we have learned and that's where we feel comfortable in. But the reward is huge if you broaden your knowledge, if you understand what other functions are doing, what do they need, so that you can help them get what they need, and always make sure that the statistical bits and pieces remain intact, so that when the trial's finished and has been successful, that you can proceed and actually get a license for the drug.
Yeah. Okay, so you described it as though for 5 years you kind of jump in, you become a trial statistician. What happens after 5 years? Then what?
Of course, when I started at Roche and I did this trial work, it's not like I forgot about all my background. So I talked to a lot of people. I felt, and each time somebody came to me and said, I have this challenge here. And of course, I would read a paper, I would talk to someone else, I would just give a talk in the department. I would continue to do research. At the time, Roche started to establish a quantitative decision-making framework around assurance, probability of success. I got sucked into that and saw that there are a lot of open methodological questions, which I started to tackle and work with other people on them. And a couple of years later, Roche didn't or had a kind of a methods group, but did not really commit to it at the time. And at some point, there again was kind of this ambition to build or to have a methods group. And they hired a couple of very senior people, or kind of took very, very senior people, but it was some kind, through all the work I already did, I was formally not a methodologist in a methods group, but I was behaving like one. I tried to make sure I did my work on the trials efficiently, and then you always have half a day, you can do something else. And so I used that kind well. So it was then somewhat obvious that I should become a member of that group. And the concept at the time was that nobody was a full-time member. You always worked 50% on projects and 50% in that group in order to make sure there is connection and you're not kind of like an internal academic thing that is disconnected from the actual business. So we called that a rotation. And then that's how I ended up in that group. I stayed on the project, just kind of cut down a few of my responsibilities. And the other 50%, I was then formally part of that methods group. And then over time, the concept was changed a little bit because it became very difficult to stay on projects, because then project timelines would always dictate, of course, and it was difficult to find the other 50%. And by the fact that a large piece of the work in the methods group was and is consulting of project teams, there was no risk you lose the connection to the business anyway. So then at some point, I just became 100% member of that methods group. And the perk is you then get a lot of freedom to do.
Okay,
but,
yep.
Yeah, you go ahead first.
So let's back up a little bit. So you gave a word, you said assurance, and predictive probably, which has a Bayesian nature to it. In that, would you consider yourself a Bayesian?
So maybe we can first have a discussion what the Bayesian nature of assurance is. I mean, you hardly this unknown. Well, because that's a question often comes up. What is Bayesian? Does Bayes theorem need to be involved? Is it just kind of you have an unknown parameter over which you assume a distribution? That's always a funny discussion. I mean, first of all, I don't care so much. I have a problem. I need to solve that problem. And whatever helps me solve that problem, that I use. But I don't think, I have a couple of papers that have Bayes in the title. Primarily around assurance, but I don't think people would consider me a Bayesian, and I do neither. Sometimes I even say, if you look at what I did in my PhD, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool frequentist. But yeah, whatever works. But I also, it's not like I cannot open Stan and then implement something just from scratch. It would really, it would make me scratch my head first. So it's not like this is routine stuff for me, but I'm very open to whatever works. And what I, of course, find tempting is Bayes gives you the interpretation many stakeholders, clinicians mean they get from frequentist statistics. And I think this is what makes it tempting, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. Specifically within this, I know you list in some of your interests predictive probability of success, which is a Bayesian. I think Bayesians have tried to use assurance because frequentists took all the nice words and we have to come up with terminology to mean similar things, whether it's a credible interval or assurance. But if you're employing methods within a pharmaceutical company, predicting the likelihood of success in a trial, it's an incredibly natural thing to integrate over the uncertainty of the various parameters, rather than picking a single value and saying, if delta is true, this is our power. So it feels like an incredibly natural way, as you described, to solve a problem of interest is using Bayesian type things. Is that commonly done in pharma?
Yes, I think yes. So at Merck, for example, we just are still in the process, that had already started before I joined a year ago. I want to give full credit at the people who were there. They developed a really nice quantitative decision-making framework which is based on assurance. So you have a trial design, you have a definition of success, which is very important, which effect you want to beat. And then you try to build your prior such that it synthesizes or integrates all the evidence you have. And that evidence can come from different places: internal clinical data, real-world data, benchmarks. I call it benchmarks. You have these huge databases with trials, and you just count how many made it within a certain indication. That gives you some indication. Mm-hmm. And then you have uncertainty that maybe is difficult to quantify, but you still want to feed that into your assessment. So we have kind of a framework where you can somewhat formalize that. But ultimately, you get a number out of it because that's what you need. It feeds into decision-making. It helps evaluate your pipeline. But for me, the biggest asset in such a framework is it incentivizes transparency. Because whatever you want to quantify, you have to put your cards on the table and make a very transparent assessment. What evidence is out there? How do we treat it? Why do we not take it into account? Why do we take it into account? Decision makers don't like the small probability of success that you compute. Okay, then you have this list of criteria, and they can pick which one do we want to mitigate. Okay, this one's 2 million, this one's 5 million. I mean, of course, I'm exaggerating how easy this is, but this is the direction in which this goes. And I think this is very, very useful. And then we use Bayes in dose finding, for example. Bayesian logistic regression is a very established tool in dose finding. So I think pharma has to solve problems, and whatever helps, you use it.
So your description of assurance, calculating predictive probability of success, the synthesis of information across things was right out of the Bayesian textbook. So we'll welcome you in anytime you want to do. You speak the language. So it's interesting. You gave this description of trial level work, where you're working within a team, probably more well-defined goals and needs of designing this trial, carrying a drug through. And then you described almost going into a methodology sort of group and maybe cross teams, larger impact. Your career thus far seems to be that you get either you're excited about or get pulled into leadership roles within this. And the methodology aspect of it, it's really interesting because I find sometimes if I sit down for 6 hours and I write programs to calculate a model, I feel like I made huge progress. But when I do things that are more sort of broad within it, it's hard to judge, have I had an impact in that? So you have these very well-defined trial things where you're making progress, and then you have much more broad type impact, trying to have an impact on statistics. Do you personally find like you can measure and have that impact on a broader scale? You enjoy that, it seems, at least from your activities.
That's an interesting question you're asking. I'm just thinking about how I look at this. And you said, I mean, I took these leadership roles, and that's maybe not even true. I mean, I just fill gaps that I perceive. For example, I with a colleague from Novartis, I co-founded the FSPI PSI special interest groups, estimates in oncology. And I mean, I gave a talk very early in the estimate days, and then Evgeny approached me and said, well, we are discussing the same problems at Novartis. Maybe we should have a beer. So we had a beer, and then we said, oh, maybe there are others. So we put a call out, and like 1 or 2 years later, we had like, I think about 8 sub-teams and 100 members. And of course, we started it, so we were kind of supposed to lead the whole thing. And with this FSPI methods leaders, it was similar. I always felt there was an underappreciation of these more technical aspects. There is an FSPI leaders group. These are the department leaders in pharma companies, and they discuss very pertinent aspects of that role, kind of careers for statisticians and how should we interact among ourselves and how do we position stats departments in companies. And that's more than a full-time job for everybody. And then I felt maybe the methods piece should deserve more attention. And then I'm well connected in Europe. I just called a couple of people and said, well, what do you think? Should we start something like that? And then we just started something like that. So, and of course, because I initiated it, I now end up kind of being perceived as the head. But this is just a group of people having regular discussions amongst each other and trying to come up with an agenda, which are the topics where everybody profits if we tackle it together. And it's not like I'm looking for these things. I just try to solve problems or to help things progress. I think that's my ambition.
That's great. And additionally, you are now finding yourself solving problems with ICH E20, which is the ICH guidance on adaptive designs. You are now becoming a deputy topic lead as part of your FPIA role in that. So more leadership. And I know we don't want to dive into that since this is you're working on this. So finding many leadership opportunities, which is great. Now you're at Roche. I think it was about 12
Not anymore.
years. No, I know. I'm going back in time.
Sorry.
So,
Just to clarify.
so chronologically, you're finding yourself solving lots of problems, many of them becoming leaders within FSPI, within FBIA, number of these, also at Roche. Now you leave Roche about a year ago, and now tell us about what you're doing now.
So it's a very similar role, but in a somewhat different environment. It's Merck. So the German Merck is a smaller company, a smaller department, a smaller pipeline, but it is one aspect that I found very exciting about Merck and the vision of the leader of the department basically is to try to integrate all quantitative functions in one shop. And of course, every company tries to do that to a certain extent, but here it is really an explicit attempt to bring together quantitative pharmacology, real-world data, statistics, statistical programming, and then you have data science and a group that does more the platform stuff. It's all in one department. And with the hope that adding this up is more than the sum of its parts, because, I mean, this is something which always made me struggle. For me, I mean, a lot of people still make a distinction between a statistician and epidemiologist, a real-world data scientist. And of course, they don't know all about everything. But, I mean, ultimately, you have data and you want to make quantitative statements, you want to quantify or assess the biases, you want to quantify uncertainty. Somebody who was exposed to so many different questions during this 4 years of consulting for medical doctors, from the first day when I joined the industry, this felt somewhat odd to me. And so for me, this trying to converge this, and of course, bringing all the specialities and all the different kinds of knowledge up to the table. I don't know as much about data quality and registries and how to set these things up as a trained epidemiologist. But I don't agree when people say, well, we are epidemiologists, we do causal inference. I have read quite a few books and papers about causal inference lately, so I think I teach about this. I can talk about this, and I would expect an epidemiologist who works in drug development that he or she knows something about clinical trials. And at some point, it's just different flavors of the same thing. So this is one thing that I found very attractive. And then, I have the opportunity to work 100% from home, which at that time was kind of something that I enjoy. I live in a very nice area with, so that is also something that allows me to kind of bring a few aspects of my life together, and that's also something that I found attractive.
Oh, very nice. It seems a common theme of yours to collaborate, bring together multiple groups, trying to, raise the boat for everybody, that everybody benefits from this collaboration, and having silos within Merck, trying to get rid of that. So that's fantastic. I wonder if I could ask you a couple things about your sort of viewpoints, and partly I'll ask you things that I'm asked that I don't have a good answer for. So now you're bringing together all these quantitative groups within Merck. How are you positioning Merck in this role with AI? And I know AI is in and of itself is a big group of things, from language models to programming to other things. How are you dealing with AI?
So first, I look at it as Bayes versus frequentist. If it helps me solve a problem, so be it, that's fine. And I actually personally, because I think this is our duty, our ambition as well, I poke myself very, very regularly for all the things I do day long. We have our internal version of ChatGPT. Could ChatGPT help here?
Yeah.
And what I find myself is it rarely does. I have my style of presentations. When I write the talk, I sit down, I take a piece of paper, I sketch what I'm going to do, and I tried it a couple of times, but there is no way AI can help me with that. It's my way of doing things, and so that's one thing. For my daily work, and I don't care so much if an email. I'm not an English native speaker, but that's fine. Maybe one or the other sentence might sound odd to a native English speaker. I'm fine with that. I don't need to check. I didn't do it before when it was not available. I will not do it now either. So, and also,
So that's daily tasks.
Yes.
So that's daily tasks.
Yes.
And it's a little bit different. I agree with you on all of that. And in some ways, over 25 years, I've sort of become. It's careful because I could say pejoratively set in my ways, and I attack problems a certain way. This, and then other people coming along. I can watch my son, who's a statistician, utilize these tools and make himself more productive, and maybe that's sort of in his ways. But what about getting away from sort of the process part of this into the quantitative part of this, into modeling, into trial design, moving into the statistics realm? And I don't want to say, getting rid of statisticians, but doing some of that task.
Maybe I don't know enough about it, but at Merck, I have been involved, worked with the teams in doing a very comprehensive probability of success for a phase 3, or kind of preparing an FDA meeting for a phase 3 and then dealing with the feedback from FDA. And if you design a phase 3, of course, at some point you need a sample size and you have a couple of assumptions. Maybe AI can do that, but that is maybe this much of the way. Until you then have a protocol that works is maybe, it's so much more, and I don't see, there are so many discussions behind, there are so many different things, you need trade-offs to make, you need buy-in from other functions, from stakeholders, until you really have a design. And then you go to the regulator, and then they have their own ideas, and then you come back. And my kind of prime example to illustrate the challenge I see with this is, we now get a lot of talk about AI can write a statistical analysis plan. Well, that's maybe fine. Okay. Now, I am very experienced in drug development, or say a CSR, a clinical study report. And you have all the outputs and you have the protocol. So it seems like an automated thing to write the clinical study report. Maybe. Okay, so when I then think how a team writes a clinical study report, it takes maybe, I don't know, say 2 months. Of these 2 months, in the old days, a medical writer would write an 80% draft in about a week. And then 7 weeks, the team would discuss, what is the messaging? What do we want to say? This should go here. And this is not accurate, blah, 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 7 weeks. Now, with AI, maybe the first week, you cut it down to 3 hours. But I'm not sure the remaining 7 weeks are affected by what AI does at all. Maybe it is, but so this is, and I sometimes feel, those people who are trying to push AI into drug development, if you really think what we're doing all day, it can make certain things more efficient, but I think the struggle of pharma industry and kind of the business model that somehow dries out, I don't think you can solve that with further optimizing processes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not sure AI can, where it is today, can really get out of that corner of just optimizing one or the other process. But yeah, maybe I'm too old already and don't have enough imagination and enough experience. I don't exclude that. But this is how I see things currently.
No, I agree with you. And I worry that I become set in my ways, sort of thing. And I want to learn and I want to understand this. But I agree with you as well. If you go into AI and say, give me a trial design, what it presents doesn't do a great job of understanding the full synthesis of what we know. What are we trying to answer? That aspect of it is the statistical intelligence that we started this with. That part of it, to some extent. So interesting. So let's maybe with a few more minutes here. What are your things you're interested in now going forward, the future of this? Now you have this huge amount of leadership role in things and tackling problems. What kind of things excite you, maybe in the next 5 to 10 years that aren't AI?
I think everybody working in this business has this folder on their desktop, papers to read. And you subscribe to this table of contents and you find all, and it keeps amazing me myself how interested I remain in kind of just sitting down and, here is this thing this guy has been talking about. I didn't know what it exactly is, so let me read this paper. So this kind of curiosity it doesn't stop for me. So I will just so currently, I really try to read up on the causal inference, and it's kind of entering drug development. If you look at the covariate guidance from the FDA, it has like standardization and kind of a different way of estimating effects. And I think in my role, I am the one in the company together with people in my team who need to trailblaze that and can bring the other statisticians up to speed and make them understand what does change, when do we need to implement different methods. So I think this kind of marrying causal inference with the clinical trial world, which is a very disparate separation to start with, but that's just how things happened, and the ICH9 addendum tried to kind of halfway fix this. But I think we need to bring this together. A randomized trial is a randomized trial the first day, and then it starts to move in the direction of an observational study, because you have this, what we now call intercurrent events and post-randomization things that happen, which you cannot just resort to randomization all the time to deal with them. And I think we overlooked a lot in that direction in the past. So kind of bringing the causal inference methodology to randomized trials, and maybe in certain instances it will not change much, but sometimes I think it can really help. That's one thing. And then, I remain interested in making trials that are more efficient. We did some research and we continue to do that with multi-state models. I think this is, again, this might seem a very old-fashioned piece of survival analysis, well understood. Maybe it is, but it has not been used to the extent it can bring benefit to clinical trials. And maybe here I'm hiding behind my own technicalities and my own hobbies and interests, but I don't mind. We just kind of worked up a paper together, or academic collaborators, they worked up a new method in this context, and it comes out you can maybe save about 5% for a trial when you do this correctly. So, this funds my salary for over my entire career. If there's one clinical trial that saves 5% of events, and I think there are still many opportunities. Covariate adjustment, or kind of this broad topic of how to best use prognostic information. this is a huge topic. Stratification, covariate adjustment, super covariates. There you land again potentially with AI, but maybe you can build a covariate based on another database and then use it in your trial. How can we make that happen? What do we need that at some point maybe regulators are comfortable with these kind of methods? It's not a very fancy, exciting list, but that kind of this. I have fun in understanding the technical details of this and then make it digestible for my stats colleagues maybe, and even a broader audience. This is
So to be clear, that is a very exciting list. And I think the people who listen to this podcast find all of those things exciting within that. So your enthusiasm is contagious, and I appreciate you coming on in the interim. By the way, have you ever been a part of an interim analysis, a data safety monitoring board?
So the first trial I worked on at Roche, it was on purpose by leadership. They put me on that trial, I think, because there was some probability it would stop at an interim analysis for efficacy. So I shepherded it through 2 futilities and then prepared the efficacy. And in fact, it stopped. So then based on that efficacy interim, we filed the trial. Yes. So my answer is yes.
Wow.
It's very interesting. And I'm also at Roche and now at Merck, a big proponent of futility interims, so trying to educate teams on that. I have never been on a data monitoring committee as a member of industry. I think that's not obvious to be part of. Yeah.
Right. Wonderful. So you were part of in the interims that ended with success, and I think this was incredibly successful. I enjoyed it. Enjoyed having you on. Thank you, Kaspar, for joining us here in the interim.
Thank you, Scott. I enjoyed it as well. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. So thank you, everybody. Until the next interim. Thanks.